tolerance, civility, free speech, freedom of association is rejected by the Muslim Brotherhood in Saudi Arabia, by Iran. There are people who have escaped these throwback societies. I have many friends whose parents escaped Iran. They're the most patriotic Americans you can imagine. Zuhdi Jasser's family escaped Syria, one of the most patriotic Americans I ever met. He calls it political Islam. It's a brilliant phrase. It's one that I've used and, of course, credited him with it. That is, Islam preaches control of the government. And he says, and in the Quran, they actually lay out rules for governing. You won't find that in the Bible. There was a Syrian activist who for some reason was able to speak at the UN. I want you to listen very, very carefully to her. It's my recollection, my friend Zuhdi Jasser, a practicing Muslim who served in the United States Navy, who's leading a movement to reform Islam, who talks about political Islam, the failure of Islam to go through a reformation the way other major faiths did, that it's a throwback in too many parts of the world by too many practitioners to the earliest of centuries. And therefore, all these things that we embrace in the West, tolerance, civility, free speech, freedom of association is rejected by the Muslim Brotherhood, is rejected in Saudi Arabia and these other regimes, by Iran. There are people who have escaped these throwback societies. I have many friends whose parents escaped Iran. They're the most patriotic Americans you can imagine. Zuhdi Jasser's family escaped Syria, one of the most patriotic Americans I ever met. He calls it political Islam. It's a brilliant phrase. It's one that I've used and, of course, credited him with it. That is, Islam preaches control of the government. Control of the government. And he says, and in the Quran, they actually lay out rules for governing. You won't find that in the Bible. You don't find it in the Jewish faith or the Christian faith. And he goes on about it and talks about it brilliantly. Here's a young woman, a Syrian activist, who wants to tell the UN a thing or two. Go.
Are you outraged with the war in Gaza? So am I. My name is Rawan Osman. I'm half Syrian, half Lebanese. Since October 7th, I visited Israel 9 times, and I want to testify before God and you, Israel is not the problem. Last week, Israel buried Shiri Bibas with her children Ariel and Kfir. Hamas said they had been arrested. Forensic reports show they were choked to death in Gaza. But many who point fingers at Israel might do better to look in the mirror. I ask Qatar, why didn't you arrest the Hamas chiefs in Doha and demand release of the hostages? Why did you finance terror? And I ask Iran, why do you send billions to Hamas and Hezbollah instead of liberating your own people who are suffering oppression and poverty? Egypt, you charged Gazans thousands of dollars to escape the war. How can you lecture about the morality of displacing Gazans? Jordan, why have you refused to accept any Gazans? Are they not your own people? Lebanon, instead of discussing Hezbollah's political role, ban the party. Syria, if the new president is sincere about his transformation, I ask him to return the body of Eli Cohen. It's been 6 decades. Allow his wife to bury him before she dies. Hamas abuses dead bodies. Be a better Arab. Be a better Muslim. Thank you.
You know, it's a minute and a half of genius, of guts, of courage. You know they have they put a warrant on her head. There's no question about it. Brilliance. I also want to remind you of the Shah of Iran in 1976, who was overthrown by this Khomeini and the Islamo-Nazi regime. The Shah of Iran was forced to flee. He was overthrown by the Islamo-Nazis because Jimmy Carter pressured the Shah. Jimmy Carter pressured for the release of Khomeini. Jimmy Carter did a lot of things that resulted in horrific things for so many people. Despite his building little shacks for individuals who are poor, doesn't make up for the other things he did while he was president. I want you to listen to what the Shah of Iran said in 1976, about half a century ago. Go.
Next, he turned to the Palestinians.
The Palestinians obviously had the sympathy of many, many people, almost all the countries in the world, persecuted people, stateless people, looking for a home or something. Yeah. You know, exactly like the sympathy that the Jews had when they were searching for a home.
Right.
But our good Palestinian friends must know that there is only a limit to where they can go and bully the world.
Bully the world?
Yes, by terrorism and blackmailing and this and that.
You know perfectly well, Your Majesty, that the leaders of the Arab world find the Palestinians as much a problem almost as the Israelis do. Isn't that a fact?
Stop. You would never hear that question today. Mike Wallace, that the leaders of the Arab world view the Palestinians as as big a problem as Israel does. And that's true today. Go ahead.
What I can say is that they should really open their eyes, reassert their situation. And if there is a hierarchy and someone there in command
Of the Palestinians, you mean?
of the Palestinians, to start a new policy, because the actual one is going to lead them nowhere.
With whom do they really have understanding? With Assad, with Sadat, with Hussein?
That's a very good question.
They have none with any of these leaders.
Not to my knowledge.
And they seem to be out of control.
It seems so today.
And what about the Arab leader who supports the Palestinians, the terrorists, with his oil money, Muammar Gaddafi of Libya?
He's crazy.
You really believe that?
Oh, yes. No doubt. The man is absolutely irresponsible and crazy.
The Shah was a dictator. So he had to go. Tell me, other than Israel, which country in that part of the world isn't led by a dictator? So why did he have to go? Because he was an American ally. And sometimes we have presidents who abuse our allies, as he was abused. He had to flee his own country. He got cancer. And he had to look around for countries that would take him. Countries wouldn't take him.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.